Good afternoon. My name is Josh Bayles. I'm going to be teaching a class on the 5 geographical regions of Alaska. As we all know, Alaska is a very huge state, but it has very distinct regions within it that have shaped how people have lived, worked, and moved across this vast expanse. Going into this today, we are not going to talk about the different cultures that advanced and developed well within the state. We're only going to be talking about the physical geographic regions. Later on, we'll move into a class that discusses how these geographical regions shaped the cultures and the peoples that have lived there. Now, the lesson objectives for today identify the 5 separate Alaska geographical regions on a map and be able to identify the differences between the geographical regions and the cultural regions. The 5 geographic regions of Alaska are divided by natural features that are used to create some boundaries. Now, these could be oceans, seas, mountain ranges, and various other things. Now, the vast distances between the population centers create regions that have very limited interaction between the different peoples. As we can see, the distance between the southeast to the far north is very extreme, hundreds of miles, and in older times, it was impassable by people just to move between one to the other due to mountain ranges, rivers, and various other things. Now, the state is broken up into the far north, the interior, south central, southeast, and western Alaska. The cultural regions are divided by traditional Alaskan natives where they lived. Now, there are more cultural regions than there are geographic regions. Now, this was shaped loosely by these geographic regions and how the peoples moved in between them and developed specific ways to interact with that culture. Looking at this, we can see that's broken up into Southwest, the Aleut, Aleutic, the Yupik, Inupiaq, and Athabaskan regions, with the Athabaskan region being here in the interior where we live in Alaska. Starting out, we'll go with we'll talk a little bit about Southwest Alaska. If you do have any questions in this class, go ahead and feel free to raise your hand. Or if I need to clarify points of what we were talking about, feel free to raise your hand and I'll talk to you then. Now, this area stretches very far out. As you can see, it goes all the way out to Attu Island, which is actually occupied by the Japanese during World War II, and there were a serious campaign fought out there. That was also a place that had very serious activities happen during the colonial era when the Russians occupied this region. Now, it stretches out into the Bering Sea, out to the north, and it is bordered on the south by the Pacific Ocean. This region also is part of the Ring of Fire that includes many active volcanoes, and in some places they can be seen. I have not been down to this region personally, but as you can see, the mild temperatures it is a mild temperature base in comparison, and this has led to a high concentration of different species of game, salmon, and other different natural resources that shaped how the native cultures lived in the state. Moving along, we will go into the far north. The far north we're all kind of aware of as the North Slope. It's got many different names. Here in Alaska, we know that the Trans-Alaska Pipeline starts up there on its journey south. This region is bordered by the Chukchi Sea to the west, the Arctic Ocean to the north, and the Brooks Range to the south. As you can see, the Brooks Range is used as a boundary between several geographic different regions, and it has severely impacted the way that commerce has moved north and south, and traditionally, the Alaska Native cultures moved north and south. Now, with this region being north of the Brooks Range, it is flat rolling tundra that is virtually treeless. On your way north, you hit a certain point where there are very few trees, and then once you go past the Arctic Circle, further north, past Dietrich on the map, there are almost no trees, and it tapers off to where it's just very small willows. During the winter, the sun sets in Barrow on the 18th of November and does not reappear until the 24th of January. This is where one of those places where they have the total darkness, and then in the summer, the sun does rise and it doesn't set. So this has caused a different set of extremes in this region for those that live there. Moving to the interior, Most of us are familiar with this if we live here in Fairbanks. Those of us that not, I'm sure you're way more comfortable in some of the other regions. The interior stretches from the Canadian border to near the Arctic Ocean. Some of its portions do actually reach bays on the ocean, with the northern border being the Brooks Range and the Alaska Range to the south. The Brooks Range also is the boundary between the far north and the interior. There are large rivers in this, what is really a large valley between two mountain ranges, the Tanana and the Yukon. They both start on the eastern edge and make their way to the ocean. The Tanana does merge into other rivers, and the same with the Yukon on their way to the sea. The Arctic Circle crosses through the northern portion of this region near Fort Yukon, and going to the northwest, you see on the map the highway that goes north that follows loosely to the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. The South Central region, those of us who are familiar. Anchorage is part of the South Central region. It stretches over to Valdez and Cordova. It ties up going up north towards Denali. This region is bordered by the Gulf of Alaska on the south, and on the north by the Aleut Range, and on the west by the Aleutian Range. This is a very land with mountains, peaks, valleys, glaciers, and rivers moving into the ocean, with varied harbors, inlets, and all the different stuff that's associated with that. Now, with the people who live in Alaska, 2/3 of the state population lives in this region, as opposed to all the others combined. So this is a hub of commerce, manufacturing, the different things that has spread due to the way this landform was shaped. The southeast, this is a region that borders on Canada on the east and the Pacific Ocean on the west. It stretches for over 500 miles and is made up of a maze of islands stretching out from the mainland into the ocean. The coastal mountain range forms the border with Canada and some of the highest peaks in the state. Now in this region, due to the tall mountain ranges, the warm ocean waters, this has made a very wet climate that suffers from almost 200 inches of rain a year. Now this has also made it a very densely forested region, and it has different species and different things than other regions due to its location. I'm going to move back up to the top map where we can discuss some of these challenges and how the state interacts with these regions. Now we can see these distinct regions by this map. It shows the vast spaces and how some of it interacts. Now originally, as Alaska became more populated, southeast, then south central, but then the interior, with the allowance for the rivers, they became primary means of transportation into the interior and around, allowed for different settlements. This worked both for Alaska Native cultures and the white gold miners, pioneers, or however you want to discuss it, to move into the interior region and into others. Now, in some of these regions, the rivers became a primary means of travel, both summer and winter, for everybody that lived there, because it allowed a way to move vast distances through mountain ranges instead of up and over mountain ranges to get caught with the glaciers and different other land features that were there. Out on the Aleutian Island chain, as it spreads so far out, it has a very different climate and landmass structure than found in the rest of Alaska. Bare, desolate mountains on small islands that is very different than the coastal ranges of southeast Alaska. This varied, vast expanse has shaped how the cultures and peoples have lived here due to the different resources available. In the southeast, very large trees, dense forests is significantly different than the far north, where there's shrubs and bushes as opposed to full trees. So this differences in the environment shaped how those that lived there and continue to live there go about their different ways of life and how they're successful. Western Alaska stretches out very far across the coast, out into the Aleutian chain all the way up to the far north, and it has different settlements and features that allowed the different groups that lived there to operate on the western coast, where they harvested sea mammals, whales, as opposed to the south central native cultures that went about their life with caribou, moose, and salmon species. So it's just this vast difference, vast distances and vast differences in environment created this place where Alaska has been home to native cultures and continues to be home to other cultures that we will address in further discussion. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. But going back to our objectives for today, identify the 5 separate regions of Alaska and explain the difference between cultural regions and geographical regions. Thank you.